Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Todd's podcast. Our guest today is the public defender for the 10th Judicial District, Mr. Rex Dimmig. The 10th Judicial District is Polk, Hardee, and
Highlands County.
And Highlands County, so I was partially correct there. And Rex is going to talk to us a little bit about his office, how he administers his office. So, Rex, I appreciate you being here. Rex graduated from FSU College of Law in about 1977. I'm not sure who's worse, the Gators or the Seminoles this year. At least you didn't lose this past weekend.
We did not lose this past weekend, but it's not been a good year.
It's not been fun. And then you went to the Assistant Public Defender's Office here in Polk County for a couple of years, and then you jumped to the State's Attorney's Office, and then private practice for 3-4 years, and then back to the Public Defender's Office. And in 2012, you were elected as the Public Defender for Polk County, and you assumed office in 2013?
That's correct.
So what's it like to kind of go back and forth from the public defender to the state's attorney's office? Was it to give you some perspective? Did you really like the work on the public defender side and you always wanted to get back to there, or what kind of drew you back to that part of life?
I'd like to say that it was a planned progression, but it really wasn't. It was sort of necessitated by circumstances at the time. When I was in law school up at Florida State, they had an internship program where you could work in a public defender's or a state attorney's office in the state and earned 3 credit hours. And the one that was available to me by the time I signed up for the class was with the public defender's office here in Bartow. So in the summer of 1977, I came down and worked for 12 weeks in the Bartow Public Defender's Office, and was fortunate enough when I left, Jack Johnson, the public defender at the time, told me to apply, and if he had a position available, he'd give me a job. So needing a job when I graduated, I did that, and he hired me, so I came down to the public defender's office.
But you're not a Polk County boy, you're Fort Walton.
No, I'm from Okaloosa County up in the Panhandle,
Okay.
Born and raised in Fort Walton Beach. Went off to New Orleans for undergraduate school and to party a bit, and then to FSU Law School. So I didn't know anything about Polk County when I took the internship program. In fact, I drove down in my little AMC Concord automobile with everything I own in it, pulled into Lakeland and said, no, I'm going to go on down to Bartow and see what the office looks like down there. And in the summer of 1977, Bartow was a whole lot smaller than it is now.
Yes.
And I sort of questioned whether or not I'd chosen.
Still working in the old courthouse?
No, at that point, the public defender's office was in a blue metal warehouse-style building.
Wow.
That sat on an oyster shell parking lot where the multi-story parking garage is now.
Wow.
Down there in Bartow. So it was a bit of a culture shock to go in there, but like so many law students and brand new lawyers, I had this ambition that, okay, I'll be a practicing lawyer with a government agency for a while, then I'll go into private practice, and eventually I wanted to become a judge. So, after 2 years, Jack Johnson came to me and said, now, Rex, it's really not good for your career if you stay with the public defender's office more than 2 years. You sort of get a reputation, so It's time for you to move on. So I did, but I went to the state attorney's office, and I worked for Quillian Yancey, who was the elected state attorney at the time. And as it turns out, that was the best learning experience I had, because it let me see how both sides of the criminal system work, how they do their jobs. And it was just invaluable to me to have that experience. So then after that, I decided, okay, I'm going to try private practice. Well, at that point, having spent 6 to 7 years in government service, I had a really hard time looking at clients and saying, I know I can help you out, but you got to give me money to do it. So I didn't actually go bankrupt, but eating was a little difficult from day to day.
Who did you work for?
I opened my own
You opened your own office,
I opened my
okay.
own office on North
That's a big
Crystal.
step.
It was. I opened it on North Crystal Lake Drive and just hung out a shingle and just thought I'd see how I'd do. And I got by okay, but, then I was married. We had our first child, and I decided, well, I need to have a little more security here. And I really did love the public defender's office and the practice in criminal law. So I spoke with Mr. Mormon and went back to the public defender's office in 1988 and haven't left since.
So the public defender's office, that was created in what, 1963? Can you tell us the evolution of how that came about, why it came about, and the importance of it?
Well, the Sixth Amendment to the United States Constitution says that everyone accused of a crime is entitled to the benefit of counsel. In Florida, prior to 1963, the way our courts interpreted that was that if you had some sort of a mental disease or defect that made it basically impossible for you to understand court proceedings, you could have an attorney appointed to represent you by the court.
A private attorney.
A private attorney. There was a fella by the name of Clarence Earl Gideon who was a drifter who had come to Florida from Arkansas, and he was hanging out in Panama City Beach, and Panama City in the early 1960s was not like Panama City is now. The college students hadn't found it yet. It was a real rural fishing area.
Old
for the
Florida.
most part. Old Florida. And Clarence Gideon was staying at a boarding house across the street from the Bay Harbor pool room. And in the middle of the night, one night, the Bay Harbor pool room was broken into by somebody who stole some Coke. Fortunately, in those days, Coke was Coca-Cola, not cocaine. Also broke into the jukebox, which for our younger audience is a very large machine you put money in to play music, and also stole some wine and some coins out of the pool table. Because Gideon was known as a petty thief, the Panama City Beach police picked him up, arrested him, charged him with breaking and entering and also with misdemeanor theft, and he had to go to trial without a lawyer. He first appeared before a judge up there in Panama City who asked him if he had a lawyer, and he said, no, I couldn't afford one. I want you to appoint one. And the judge said, I'm sorry, under Florida law, I can't appoint you because you are mentally capable of conducting a trial. So Gideon went to trial without a lawyer. The jury was out a little bit less than 30 minutes, and he was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in state prison, which was the maximum penalty. So he gets to state prison, and he says to himself, what in the world does the Sixth Amendment mean, this right to counsel, if you've got to be mentally ill to get court-appointed counsel? So he just took, basically it looks like notebook paper. I've seen a copy of it, and it's issued by the Florida Department of Corrections. And he hand wrote out a petition to the United States Supreme Court just saying, hey, why can't I have a lawyer? And the United States Supreme Court took the case. They, unlike the judge in Florida, appointed him a lawyer to represent him in the U.S. Supreme Court, and it was Abe Fortas, who years later became a justice of the United States Supreme Court himself. And the case was litigated. Oral arguments were done up there at the Supreme Court, and in 1963, the U.S. Supreme Court said, no, the right to counsel means that anyone who cannot afford to hire their own attorney, the court must appoint a lawyer to represent them. So the legislature came into special session and created the Florida Public Defender System at the time.
And you're the fifth one that we've had here in Polk County, correct?
That's correct.
So,
there have only been 5 of us so far.
I mean, it's a very distinguished office, I think. And we were visiting earlier. You're probably the least known of all the constitutional officers that we have here in Polk County. And by design.
It is by design and quite intentional on my part and my predecessor's part. It's somewhat unique that Florida elects its public defenders. So every 4 years we have to face the voters. And it's not a particularly good campaign slogan to say, "Hi, I'm Rex Dimmig running for public defender. Vote for me. I'll make your streets less safe." So we try and sail under the radar.
Candidates with a worse message, but you're right. That is a bad one.
So, we try to sail under the radar. Fortunately, the vast majority of people don't need the services of the public defender's office. They're good law-abiding citizens, so they don't need criminal defense lawyers representing them. So we aren't as well known as some of the other offices.
Do you think it should be an elected office, or do you think it should be appointed, or do you think the state's got it right by electing them?
I think the state absolutely has it right. I answer to the voters of the 10th Judicial Circuit, Polk, Highlands, and Hardee
Which
Counties.
are the citizens.
They are the citizens.
Right.
I do not have to answer to a governor. I do not have to answer to a board of supervisors, which some states have. I answer directly to the voters. If they don't like what I'm doing, they vote me out.
Well, they obviously like what you've done. You were reelected in 16 and 20.
Correct.
You decided not to run for election in 2024. Is that?
That's right. I'm 71 years old. I've been doing this. This is my 47th year of practicing law, and I've decided it's just time to retire and spend more time with my family.
Well, good for you. So you had mentioned that we got Polk Highlands and Hardee County, excuse me. What percentage of cases are in each of those counties?
Well, Todd, you just asked me an impossible question.
Okay.
If I could,
like 2/3 are Polk
Well,
because of the population.
I'm going to tell you, I can give you actual numbers, but if I could do math, I'd probably be a doctor today instead of a lawyer. So actually calculating percentages is really difficult for me. But
I'm not as smart as Eli either, so dumb it down for me if you would.
Right now, I ran some numbers yesterday, and right now the Public Defender's Office has, for all three counties, has 5,928 cases.
Active cases.
Active open cases.
Wow.
624 of those cases are in Highlands County, and 213 of those cases are in Hardee County. So you can see the vast majority of the cases are here in Polk.
How many attorneys do you have on your team that prosecute in all three of those counties?
Well, we're one of the unique offices in the state. We not only have a trial office, but we also do the appeals for both the 2nd District Court of Appeal and the 6th District Court of Appeal. So on our trial side, we have 49 attorneys right now.
Is that enough, or are you
overworked
and everybody's just exhausted?
Pre-COVID, we generally tried to keep about 60 trial lawyers.
Wow.
And now we're down to this 49. It's been very, very difficult since COVID to recruit lawyers and difficult to retain lawyers. So the lawyers are grossly overworked at this point, trying to handle the caseloads they have.
Why is it so hard to recruit? Is it the public defender's office? Is it that way is Brian in the state's attorney's office having some of the same issues, or is it a Polk County thing, or a 10th Judicial thing, or is it statewide? All the PDs are having a hard time recruiting.
It's largely statewide. There are a few offices that are doing better, but it's largely statewide, and it's public defender's offices, it's state attorney's offices, it's basically every government law office. There seems to be less desire of recent graduates of law schools to go into public service. And I think a large part of that is attributable to the massive student loan debts they have when they come out. That's one question I always ask people when they interview with our office, and it is not at all unusual for somebody to have $200,000 in student loan debt.
For law school?
For law school. So when you come out and I look at you and say, well, your starting salary here will be $65,000, and they know that they can go down the street to a private firm and probably get a job at 90,000 plus.
Right.
And then the thing that exacerbated the problem, and I think sped up a problem that we saw coming anyway, was working conditions. With COVID and the pandemic, offices had to learn how to operate remotely.
Right.
So a lot of people, if you worked for an insurance defense firm, if you worked for some of the civil firms, law firms, you could work from home, get on your computer, and you could be a very effective attorney. That's really not possible with the public defender's office. A significant percentage of our clients are in the jails.
Right.
And when COVID first started, there wasn't video connectivity with our jails, so we had to rush to try and do that. But we also need to be in court very, very regularly. It's an unusual week when an attorney isn't in court at least 3 days. So, we have to be there in the office. We have to be going to the jails. So the working conditions have made it difficult to recruit as well.
Do you think the law schools pumping out as many attorneys as they always have, or are the numbers coming out, or just less attorneys entering the workforce?
No, the law schools are at full capacity, pumping them out. Unfortunately, the last several administrations of the bar exam, the passage rates have been lower than they've been for several years. So we aren't getting as many people admitted to the Florida bar. But the law schools are cranking them out. It's just that their interest in joining public interest law firms is not as great as it once was.
So does your entire budget come from the state? Do you get any monies from counties, or since you're a state constitutional officer, do you get 100% of your funding from Tallahassee?
Not 100%. We get the vast majority of our funding from Tallahassee. There was a revision to Article 5 of the Constitution that changed funding. It used to be that the counties provided a great deal of funding for the public defender's offices and for state attorney offices. But with Revision 5 to Article 7, that changed. The vast majority now comes from state funds. What the counties do provide, they're required to provide us with a building and the basic infrastructure. They got to provide us with a phone system. They got to provide us with a computer network and things of that nature. But the vast majority comes from the state.
Todd's podcast is sponsored in part by SVN Saunders Ralston Dantzler Real Estate. Since 1996, the firm has offered unrivaled brokerage services throughout Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. With over 90 expert advisors throughout the region, our team has the knowledge and resources to help clients realize their most ambitious real estate investment goals. When you choose SVN Saunders Ralston Dantzler Real Estate, you have access to a diverse suite of commercial and land services, including forestry consulting, land management, auctions, property management, commercial leasing, and negotiating conservation easements. If you're seeking to invest in land or explore commercial real estate opportunities in the Southeast, contact us today at svnsaunders.com or call 877-518-5263 to connect with an advisor today.
How many investigators do you have? You said you got 49 attorneys. How many investigators do you need to support those 49 attorneys, and do you have enough of them?
I have right now 8 investigators across the circuit. I could always use more, but we're able to do a good job. They're very well-trained individuals. Some offices rely heavily on retired law enforcement officers. Right. I do not do that in our office. We don't have any retired law enforcement officers working in our investigative staff. This may sound harsh. Law enforcement's job is to solve crimes.
Right.
Our job is to take the evidence that exists and see if everything was done properly in
Correct.
A case and that the state has the evidence necessary to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. So it's a different mindset. So I have found that hiring individuals who do not have the law enforcement background, who are not interested in trying to solve the crime, but are interested in looking at all of the evidence and seeing how it benefits the defense, is a better way to go.
So you've got 8. Do you have money for more if 4 more decided, hey, I want to go join the public defender's office for the 10th district? Or do you have more people that want to work for you as an investigator than you have money?
I've got a little bit of money. The legislature has been fairly good to us the last 3 years in giving state employees, all state employees, raises. So, we've got a little bit of money, but I try to spend as much of that as possible with the lawyers so that we can get their caseloads down. Pre-COVID, I considered a felony lawyer carrying a caseload of 80 open cases at any given time to be pretty much the maximum that they
It
could
just
handle.
seems like a phenomenal amount of cases for one attorney.
It is. That's an unreasonable number, but it was what we could do. Now lawyers are carrying 110 to 130 cases. And public defenders, I mean, I've heard it all over the course of my career. I've heard us referred to as public pretenders, and that we're conductors on the railroad to state prison and things of that nature. And I understand where that perception of us comes from, because quite frankly, with the caseloads that we carry, we cannot provide the level of service one-on-one with the clients that we think is appropriate and that clients deserve. I sort of analogize it to it, and I'm probably going to get you sued now by Sam's Club and Costco, but I kind of look at it like going to the public defender's office is like shopping in these big warehouse type stores. When you leave, you've got a product that you're happy. You've got what you wanted when you went in there and you're happy with it. But the experience of shopping in there has not been the most pleasant.
Right.
And that's much the way we are. Because we cannot communicate with our clients at the level that they deserve, they become frustrated. And so
Plus, many of them are still in jail.
Most of them are still in jail,
Right.
yes.
So they're not in a great mindset starting off.
Right. So, I try to spend the resources that we have on providing attorneys, do make sure that we have enough investigators to go out and do their jobs. But quite frankly, I'll load up a little bit more on them so that I can relieve a little bit on the lawyer side.
What kind of relationship do you have with the state's attorney's office, with the judges, the bailiffs? From what I've noticed in my time, everyone at least tries to be professional. And if you can at least maintain professionalism, the system will work. It's frustrating, but if you treat everyone with respect, you can get through the difficult adversarial type process that you're involved in.
We pride ourselves here in the 10th Circuit with how well the agencies are able to work with one another. Yes, it is an adversarial system, and we have to remember that it's designed and intended to be an adversarial system. But that doesn't mean we can't be civil to one another. I respect what Grady Judd, Sheriff Judd, does with his agency and what all of the local police chiefs do with theirs. I respect the job the courts have. And equally importantly, I know they respect the job that we have to do. Grady and I have each other's cell phone numbers. We call each other.
As you
when we need
should.
to. Yes.
As you should.
As we should. Unfortunately, it's not that way in some parts of the state. So while it's adversarial, it is a understanding and respect for the jobs that each of us have. So it's really a very good professional working relationship.
I mean, that's sad that there's other parts of the state or country where there is not that professional relationship. Doesn't mean you got to call each other up and go have a hamburger for lunch on Friday, or have each other's family over for Sunday afternoon. But you do have to respect each other and realize everyone's got a part in the process. And if the goal is to get the best form of justice, everyone's got to be treated fairly and let the system work.
Absolutely. I mean, and unfortunately, I've seen it change over the years. I I recently spoke at a seminar on professionalism, and there were new rules passed about professionalism, and lawyers have to have a specific course in professionalism that we watch a video of once every year and all. And I stood up and said, you know, all of that's really kind of ridiculous. When I got started, what we would do, you would talk to the prosecutors, you'd talk with law enforcement, and when you went to trial, when you walked through the front doors of a courtroom, you knew you were walking into like a boxing arena. It was time that you put the gloves on and you fought it out. But when it was over, what we did, no matter who won or who lost, you'd meet in the middle of the courtroom, you'd shake hands, and an awful lot of times you would then go out and have a beer with one another.
Right.
So to me, what we need to have, instead of all these professionalism rules, we need to make beer cheaper.
Well, that could be your cause for when you retire.
That may be my next job.
But, you know, I noticed that also on our county commission, as we didn't see eye to eye on every issue. Sometimes we were vehemently in opposition to other people. There's 5 of us. But every meeting that we had, you know, every commission meeting, which we were twice a month, we would all go and break bread together. You know, usually it was 5 plus the manager and the county attorney to make sure we weren't doing anything wrong. But you would go, and if you're breaking bread with someone or having a beer with someone, it kind of takes a little of the edge off of being adversaries. And, you know, on the county commission with 5 Republicans, there was a lot more commonality than adversarial sides. But it's the same thing, is one, you treat each other with respect. I'm sure y'all treated each other and you fought like, you know, with respect, but you fought like dogs for your side of the case.
Yep.
And like you said, when it was over, you shook hands and you moved on and you did the best you could.
And a big part of it is you can't take what happens in the courtroom personally. You know, if my office files a motion saying that a law enforcement officer illegally searched somebody's car, for instance, that's not a personal attack on that law enforcement officer. That's saying in this instance, under those particular circumstances, you didn't quite follow the rules. Doesn't mean you're a bad law enforcement officer or anything. It means under these particular circumstances, the law says it has to be done this way, and it wasn't. If you take that personally, if you say, oh, gee, you're not treating me professionally, you're not treating me with respect, then the civility disappears, and it gets to be a really ugly situation. But if everybody recognizes, hey, we all make mistakes, every single one of us, and when it's pointed out, don't take it personally. It is just part of the job. It's part of the way the system is designed. And, you know, if I can sort of paraphrase Winston Churchill, who once said, democracy is one of the worst forms of government that exists. The only exception is every other form that's ever existed. The same thing is true, really, of the American criminal justice system. It's far from perfect. But it is the best that's out there. And if we all recognize we're just doing our jobs, we will make mistakes. But that's part of the job. And if we respect the job each one of us does, then we can maintain civility, and the system will work so much better.
So let's talk a little bit about plea bargaining, public interaction. What's the importance of negotiating a plea bargain or an agreement? And if you do that with the other side, if you do negotiate a plea, does it have to be signed off by the victims, or is it wholly between the prosecution and the defense?
Plea bargaining has a terrible reputation, and it is absolutely critical to the functioning of our criminal justice system. The 10th Circuit, again, we pride ourselves in that we try a lot of cases. The 10th Circuit tries more cases than any other circuit in the state, just in terms of raw numbers. We try more cases than Miami tries. We try more cases than Tampa tries, because we believe that if a person wants to take their case to trial, they ought to be able to do that. But even with that, 96% of the cases our office is appointed to are resolved through a negotiated plea agreement. because if we tried, all of the cases,
Right.
it would just be an impossibility. So plea bargaining is essential. And it's also therapeutic in many ways.
Bring some closure.
I'm on both sides. It is an acknowledgement by the defendant that they did something wrong, which is always a good step towards changing behavior, and it provides closure for the victims. So, resolving these cases timely, where both sides, they may not be 100% happy, but if they feel like they had their voice heard and they were paid attention to, they'll be satisfied with the outcome, and that's positive for the system.
Are the sentencing guidelines that we have in Florida, are they good or bad? Again, I think they're part of the plea agreement deal. They're certainly considered. Do you think they're good for the criminal justice system in general, and are they applied equally?
I am constantly frustrated by the fact that we still call the sentencing scheme in Florida sentencing guidelines. And, I apologize if I offend.
You're not.
But sentencing guidelines was something that was created decades ago because of discrepancies in how sentencing was done in the state, particularly in the South Florida area, Miami, Fort Lauderdale. The sentences that were being imposed were lower than they were in most of the rest of the state. So the legislature came and says, wait a minute, we need to have some level of consistency throughout the state. So they created sentencing guidelines, and they truly were guidelines. What they did was they went back, I think it was 20 years, and looked at sentences that had been handed out. And, they had people, unlike me, who could do math, and they figured out, okay, with these were the primary factors that went into sentencing, and here's, prior record, things of that nature. And they came up with a range, truly guidelines, and there were cells within it. Said, okay, if you score X number of points, here's what the recommended sentence is. But judge, you still have the discretion. You can go up, you can go down. We did away with that. We still have a score sheet, which is
We
why
the state or we are district?
we the state.
Okay.
The state still has a score sheet, which is why people still call it sentencing guidelines, because we had score sheets under what was truly sentencing guidelines. But now what we have, and it was put into effect in 1998, is the Criminal Punishment Code. And it has taken almost all of the discretion away from judges. There aren't these cells where there are guidelines. It's not quite mandatory sentencing, but it's getting very, very close to it. And personally, I think it's one of the worst things that's ever been done. Within the statute that created the Criminal Punishment Code, it says, and I can almost verbatim quote this, it says, the primary purpose of sentencing in Florida is to punish the offender. Rehabilitation is a desirable goal, but must be secondary to punishment. Well, to me, that doesn't make a lick of sense. The only goal of the criminal justice system has got to be to change people's behavior.
But you can't change everyone's behavior.
No, you can't. Some people, and I'm the first to acknowledge
Should
this,
just be
some
punished.
some people need to be incapacitated, where they can't go out there and commit another crime.
Right.
But an awful lot of people, you can change their behavior, and punishment isn't the only way that you can change behavior. Basically, the way I look at it, we represent three kinds of people. We do represent really, really evil people who you just aren't ever going to change their behavior, and yeah, we got to incapacitate them so that they can't go out and commit new offenses. They're entitled to their day in court, to due process of law, and all of their constitutional rights being protected, and we'll do that. But we recognize they can't be changed, so they need to be incapacitated. Then we represent people at the far other extreme, which is somebody who's just gone out and done something really stupid. Now, I'm not going to speak for you, but for myself, when I was a teenager, I did some stupid things that would have gotten me into some serious trouble with the law. I think an awful lot of people have done that. And
Yes.
just the threat of being in the criminal justice system, being caught one time,
Right.
is enough for most of those people to never do it again.
Right.
They learn their lesson, and that's the objective of the system, to change their behavior so they won't do it again. And then we got the vast majority of the people who are somewhere in the middle. They're not really just totally evil people. They're not just stupid people who made one-time mistake and learned from it. But a lot of those people in the middle have issues that have contributed. Please note, I'm not saying caused. I'm saying contributed to their committing criminal offenses. They may have a drug or alcohol problem. They may have a mental health problem. They may just be so dirt poor that they don't know where they're going to get a meal the next time they get hungry. We need in our sentencing for those people to address those issues so that hopefully they will not commit new offenses once they're outside of the criminal justice system. And that's where I think we focused too much on purely punishment and not enough time spent on addressing the problems that contribute to people committing crimes.
Hey, listeners.
Hey, everyone.
Hola.
Hi, all.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, this is Rob Palumbo.
This is Fred Hyde.
This is Juliet Ashley Vide.
Dr. Angela Garcia Falconetti.
This is Congressman Scott Franklin.
This is Margie Grant.
This is Jake Palumbo.
And I want to thank you for listening to Todd's podcast.
Thank you for listening to Todd's podcast.
Thank you for listening to Todd's podcast.
Please make sure that you like and or subscribe.
Don't forget.
Don't forget.
Don't forget to subscribe to Todd's podcast on your favorite podcast app. Tune in and listen.
Join in and listen to us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
What are the most challenging cases that y'all handle? The most emotional. I'm sure are you ever scared of the people you're representing? Going, holy cow, this guy scares the crap out of me.
In all the years I've done it, I've probably only been scared of a defendant less than a handful of times.
Okay.
And we, when we go down to the jail to visit with a client, it's changed. Now there's plexiglass between us, but
Right.
it used to be you were in a little basically 5x5 room,
Right.
locked in there with them. Right. And like I say, only a handful of times did I ever feel frightened by being in that situation. Now, there's a difference feeling frightened and feeling repulsed by what the person is accused of having done. And those are the really difficult cases. When the crime that is alleged to have been committed is just so heinous, so horrific. You know, we're human beings. We live in the community.
Right.
We want safety. We raise our families here. So child victims is the ones that are the most trying mentally on us. When you see some of the horrible things that have been done to children, it's very difficult. And every lawyer, every defense lawyer, has to have some sort of mechanism, some sort of way of addressing that particular.
How do you help your attorneys find that gear to compartmentalize almost what the crime was and your personal feelings for this person? Say, I've got a professional job I've got to do to defend this person. I mean, is it a training that they go through? Is it just, does that contribute to some of the burnout that your men and women go through? I mean, it's got to be incredibly emotional to you guys.
It does contribute to some of the burnout that people have. Just as a quick aside, also contributing to the burnout is the really horrendous sentences, the lengthy sentences some people get for relatively minor offenses. That really wears on people and burns them out as well. But the way we deal with it, fortunately, the state of Florida has something called the Lawyer Assistance Program, where any lawyer who works for a state agency has access free of charge to mental health counseling, up to, I believe it's 6 sessions of mental health counseling.
It can't be enough.
It's not enough, but at least it's a start.
Yeah.
We do training in the office. We bring mental health counselors into our office to provide training. We now will frequently have training sessions where we talk about methods people can adopt to deal with the stress, a phrase that annoys me at times, but I have to recognize how they can have a better work-life balance so that they can address the stress. It is.
It's the truth. You've got to figure out some way to try and leave it at home. I mean, try and leave it at work so that when you get home, you can function with your family and try and have some sense of normalcy.
Yeah. I mean, when I got started, the public defender's office was a whopping 9 lawyers. And, we worked Monday through Friday. Usually you'd get into the office a little bit before 8. If you left before 7 at night, it was unusual. We tended to work at least one of the 2 days over the weekend. And then the one free day, we'd go out and we'd party really hard.
Right.
And that was not a good way.
Right.
That's why criminal defense lawyers particularly have one of the highest suicide rates in the country. So it's a good thing that we're now recognizing burnout and that you have to have this better work-life balance. It's still a struggle. We used to, at one point in time just before the pandemic, I had 3 mental health counselors who worked in my office. They primarily worked with clients trying to find ways to address their mental health issues when they got out of the criminal justice system, but they also counseled with my staff. And unfortunately, with the pandemic and funding issues and all, I had to let those people go. But we're making extensive use of the lawyer assistance program, and it needs to be addressed more than we're able to do at this point.
Do you ever feel empathy for the people you're trying to defend that you just know are guilty? I mean, and I think you said there's 3 levels of people that you defend, and obviously you feel some empathy for the first group that just did something stupid. The next group may have been a product of their environment or whatever. But some of the worst, do you ever just say, I'm too bad his life turned out that way or her life turned out that way?
About the only way you can deal with some of those cases is to not try to have empathy for them.
Okay.
Just recognize, hey, this is a individual who can't be saved, but I'm, going to do my job of making sure they have a defense and that all their constitutional rights are protected. But for the others, for the 2 other classes, yes, you have a lot of empathy for them. You, as I said a few minutes ago, one of the things that contributes to burnout is the incredibly harsh sentences that some people get for relatively minor sorts of offenses. So you do feel bad for those individuals. You understand how they got where they are. Fortunately, and I hope we can get into this here in a minute, the 10th Circuit, well, not the whole 10th Circuit, Polk County has a number of what we call problem-solving courts, which is a direction that I think the entire criminal justice system needs to move, where we address the issues that contribute to people committing crime. But we have a number of those programs already, and they're excellent programs. They really do a good job.
I agree. We talked about that with Brian, the Veterans Court, the Teen Court, Traffic Court, diversion programs, and some of those things. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. We've got multiple different drug courts. We have a misdemeanor drug court. We have a felony drug court. We have a juvenile drug court. We have the mental health courts for people who are suffering from some sort of mental illness or traumatic brain injury. We have the Veterans Court for people who have served in the military and come back, and because of some of the things that they've seen or had to do while in the military, they find themselves getting in trouble with law enforcement. And, just having other people who have experienced the same thing,
right,
working with them has been very helpful. One of the best programs that we have, and we were a little bit late coming to it, Florida used to call it the Juvenile Civil Citation Program. Now they call it the Pre-Arrest Diversion. And it's a program where, for a juvenile, like when I talked about some of the things I did as a
Right.
teenager. If a juvenile commits a minor misdemeanor offense, and by minor I mean nonviolent, if they get arrested, suddenly they've got a record that goes with them at least until they're 21, and in many instances much further than that because they've got to disclose it on job applications and things. But we now have a program that is incredibly effective in Polk County, where the juvenile is taken by law enforcement agency down to the Juvenile Assessment Center in Bartow. Sheriff Judd refers to that as his therapeutic ride. And it's sort of like when you used to be told, oh, your mother would look at you after you did something and say, when your father gets home, you're going to be in real trouble. Well, it's your father is the Juvenile Assessment Center, and you have this panic fear as you take the ride down to Bartow. But then when you get to the assessment center, they look at you and say, no, it's not serious enough to have this impact the rest of your life. So we're going to release you. You're not going to be formally arrested. There are things you have to do, attend classes, write letters of apology, do community service hours, but you don't have that criminal record. So that's been a very effective program. And actually Polk County, if it's not the top county in the state, it's very close to the top county in the state in the number of people who are eligible for that program that we actually put through that program.
So why isn't that a District 10 wide thing? You said it's primarily Polk County. Why aren't they doing that in Highlands and Hardee and the other counties? Are they not? They're just not caught up to where we are or what we're doing?
They just don't have the same resources
Okay.
that we have available. Hardee County, for instance, in any given month, if they have 5 kids who are eligible for the program, that's been a really bad criminal month for them down there. So, they just can't devote the resources.
Right.
It does take a lot of resources for these programs. So, Highlands and Hardee just are not up to the same level we are here in Polk yet.
Do you still get to court and try cases, or have you just transitioned all into administrative managing and operating your company, basically?
I don't get into court as much as I would like. I do not carry a caseload at the
Okay.
present time. I found that it was just too difficult with all of the bureaucratic responsibilities
Right.
to carry a caseload and adequately represent those individuals. I will still appear in court on issues that affect policy of the office. So I am in court on motion hearings. Right now we're engaged in on our appellate side, we're engaged in an argument over who has to pay for appellate transcripts. So, I get involved in policy type decisions and case litigation, but not on a day-to-day basis.
So it seems like in the news, the legal system has been under kind of an unprecedented assault from both sides. You got a former president who's claiming bias by prosecutors, judges, juries, and anyone else that they can name. And you've got the other side who's verbally assaulting the Supreme Court, trying to undermine them. We need more of them. That can't be good for our judicial system on any side. How do you manage your team to say, hey, don't pay attention to the news, whichever station you listen to, let's just focus on our job? I mean, do you just bring it back to what's right in front of you every time?
That's the only way I can think of to do it. I mean, it is very, very concerning to me how the justice system, criminal and civil, does not have the confidence amongst the public that it had when I first got started in this business. And as I've said before, the system is going to make mistakes, but people have to have confidence that the system works most all of the time. Otherwise, you don't have a system. I mean, if you have no confidence in the system, why would you follow the law?
Well, how do we get that confidence back?
We get it back by not openly criticizing jury verdicts, for instance. A lawyer, if a jury comes back with a verdict contrary to what my office believes is appropriate, and if I get up and I criticize that jury, the Florida bar can sanction me.
Right.
But other individuals do it all the time now. They get up and say, oh, this jury just got it wrong. Well, I'm sorry. There has yet to be a case tried in the history of the United States where one of those commentators sat and listened to every piece of evidence that was introduced and listened to the jury instructions and deliberated with the other members of the jury to reach a decision. You've got to respect the process that those jurors went through. You may not agree with the decision that they made, but they made it based upon what they heard, what instructions they were given, and what they talked about amongst themselves. So don't criticize them.
But do you put that blame on the media for publishing those criticisms? Because if I don't like something and I'm out screaming, no one's listening. I mean, no one hears it other than if you happen to be walking by and I'm on the courthouse steps. But if it's put in the paper, or if it's put on the news, if the press would stop amplifying those voices, even if it's from a former president, even if it's from, a political figure, wouldn't a lot of that confidence come back?
I think if the public didn't hear a lot of the criticism, yes, the confidence would come back. But at the same time, we shouldn't be censoring people. But what we should be doing is, and this is going to really ring some bells for you, is fact check things as it's being said. If somebody gets up and says, this jury got this wrong, point out
Right.
why the jury didn't necessarily get it wrong.
Rarely is there a follow-up question in any interview as to why are you saying that?
Right.
And that's where, and maybe that's the point that I did not articulate very well, is you can say, I don't like Rex in a gray T-shirt, but why? Let me explain why he looks better in a white shirt or a green shirt. And I think that's just the lack of confidence I have in the media.
It's all sound bites. You can, a 3-second sound bite is going to get a lot more coverage
Right.
than a 3-minute explanation as to why you said what you said. And that's very difficult. I'll tell you something that people think I'm crazy. I think the worst thing that has happened to the news is the responsibility of Ted Turner, because he created 24-hour news channel. It used to be the news, Walter Cronkite or Huntley and Brinkley. 30 minutes.
News has become entertainment.
News has absolutely become entertainment now. They have to fill 24 hours. So, there's even one show, and I honestly don't remember which one it is, that the intro is the fusion of news and entertainment. Well, news and entertainment can never be fused together. They never should be fused together. They're two separate things.
Correct.
Tell them the facts. Then if you want to have commentary as a separate show or something, okay, maybe. But
And clearly labeled, this is editorializing, or this is commentary.
Yeah. But, let's get the facts out there. The huge problem I see now, it's not that we disagree so much on policy. We don't agree on what the facts are.
Yeah.
And we've got to get where we can agree on what the facts are so that we can restore confidence, not just in our justice system, but in so many of our institutions of government.
Hey everybody, this is your host Todd Dantzler, and I hope you're enjoying this episode. I would like to take a moment to do a shameless plug for my real estate business. As most of you know, I'm a partner with SVN Saunders Ralston Dantzler Real Estate, but I am also a working broker who is very active in listing and selling real estate. I've been in this business for over 41 years. I know, you're thinking he can't be, he's so young looking, but no, it's true. I've been actively listing and selling commercial real estate my entire working career on properties ranging from ag land to multifamily projects to office and commercial and industrial properties. I have held the distinguished CCIM designation since 1991. This is the highest designation you can achieve in the commercial real estate field. I believe that a big part of my success in the real estate business is because of the relationships that I have fostered throughout the state of Florida and also right here in Polk County. So if you have any real estate needs in buying or selling, please give me a call to see if I can help out. My direct line to my desk is 863-877-2846. Again, that's 863-877-2846. What do you think are the biggest misconceptions about your office
That
and
we're
the
not-
public defender in general?
That we're not real lawyers.
Really?
When I first started, I distinctly remember in 1978, first appearance hearings are what somebody who's been arrested, they have to go before a judge within 24 hours, and the judge tells them what they're charged with, tells them what their bond is, if they can bond out, and then asks them if they want a lawyer to represent them so that the public defender can be appointed in certain cases. And I remember being in front of a particular county court judge at a first appearance hearing, and that judge looked at him and say, "Would you like the public defender, or do you want to hire a real lawyer?" Well, and that's...
Are they talking about like a fee lawyer?
Yeah, a private lawyer that you go out and pay. But they refer to him as a public defender or a real lawyer. We are real lawyers. We
Think
went
that's
to
a
law.
lack of education or a lack of respect for your office?
I think it's a lack of respect for the office.
Really?
We go to the same law school every other lawyer goes to. We take the same bar exam every other lawyer goes to. Quite frankly, I think we have more training programs that we attend than most lawyers do. We are the criminal law experts. If you ask a lawyer if their kid or their spouse got in trouble, would you want a private lawyer or would you want the public defender's office? Most people would say they want the public defender's office because we are the ones, this is all we do.
Right.
So we're the experts at it. But because we have such a large volume of cases, like I've talked about before, I understand why our clients are dissatisfied with the level of communication they're able to have with us. But when judges and when other people in the system talk about us in negative sorts of ways, when they're derogatory in their expression towards us, it doesn't do the system any good, and it hurts the provision of justice.
How often do you think wrongful convictions happen? And is that too subjective of a question that's not fair to ask?
I just don't think it can be answered.
Okay.
We don't know what we don't know.
I thought it was a good question when I wrote it. When I said it, I said, this doesn't sound like it's going to be fair to ask.
DNA has been a wonderful development to help with exonerations because, now you have scientific evidence. So it's not, witness A says one thing, witness B says, now the jury has to decide who they're going to believe and who they're not. Now we've got scientific evidence that can't be refuted. So we've seen a number of wrongful convictions overturned because of DNA. But you don't have DNA in every case. So how many...
But it also helps with convictions as well.
Oh, it does.
Hey, you can't tell me this isn't your blood because it states right here that it is.
Yeah, it absolutely helps. It helps ensure that the outcome is correct, whether that's a conviction or whether it's an acquittal.
From your side, do you think the system gets it right the vast majority of the time?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I mean, you hear the evidence, you know more than anybody other than the prosecutor side. I mean, you should have most of the same evidence. When you're done, you say, yeah, that jury got it right.
Yeah, it's...
They may have gotten the conviction correct. The sentence may be a little more subjective, but at least the guilty or not guilty.
Yeah, sentencing, that's up to the judge. And we could talk on about 30 of your podcasts about my feelings on that. But no, the jury gets it right the vast majority of the time.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. We've been at this about an hour. And one, you've got an incredible voice. And I don't know if you know David Carmichael. He's an attorney down there. He came in and talked about the red flag laws. Another incredible voice. You two should do a joint podcast because you two sound incredible on these podcasts. And I mean that as a compliment. So, tell us a little bit more about yourself. And I know you're not a boastful person.
No.
What do you like to do? What are your hobbies?
I like getting away from it all. I go camping.
Okay.
I started years and years ago with a little pop-up tent, and then I went to a travel trailer, pop-up type travel trailer. Then I went to a regular travel trailer, and now I've got a Class A motorhome.
Okay.
And I like going to the state parks because I like to not see my neighbors.
Right.
I particularly like going.
And no one knows you there.
No one knows me there. I particularly like going to places where you can't get internet or cell service. It lets you just completely disengage for a few days.
Well, what keeps you motivated every day to go to the office? And I know your career's coming to a close, but you've been highly motivated. You've had an incredible run, lots of stress, lots of success. What's your motivation every day to say, I want to put on coat and tie and go down and do my job?
It's a belief that our system, even with its flaws, is the best that there is. And I go to work every day to try and ensure that we make it work the way it's designed to work. If I can take up a little more time.
Sure.
The thing that annoys me the most right now, understanding that prosecutors' offices, like our offices, are understaffed. The courts do not have the staffing that they need either. But when somebody looks at me and says, I'm just going to make it work, I get mad as hell. It's not, the system is not supposed to just work. You're not supposed to bend the rules or break the rules to make it work. You've got to make it work the way it's designed to work. So I go to work, what motivates me is to go down there and say, we're going to hold everybody's feet to the fire. We're going to make them do it the way it's supposed to be done, not just make it work.
So the process is just as important to you, almost as, if not more important than the outcome.
It's
because
more,
if the process is pure, then the outcome will be the outcome.
right. I mean, the process is to me, far more important than the outcome. If you do the process right, yeah, there are going to be mistakes made, but most of the time you're going to get the outcome right. But when you cheat on the process, I mean, I tell people, it's one of the things I do during my initial orientation with a new hire. I say there's 3 things you really need to do. You need to read the rules of criminal procedure front to back once every 6 months. You need to read the rules of evidence front to back once every 6 months. But then the one that really surprises people is I say you need to read the rules of judicial administration at least once a year, because then you know how the judges are supposed to do their jobs.
Okay.
And, when you know the rules, I'm not saying, you got to be able to stand up in front of a judge and say, oh, this is rule 3.271.
Right.
But you got to know what they say so you can sit there and say, wait a minute, you're not doing it right. Whether it's the prosecutor who isn't doing it right, whether it's the judge who isn't doing it right, or when you're in a trial with the rules of evidence, if it's law enforcement or a witness who isn't doing it right. But process is everything to me.
And I know judges' jobs are to call balls and strikes. I'm sure you have seen judges that get outside those lines a little bit. How do you deal with that? I say this because your career's coming to a close, so hopefully there won't be any repercussions. But
well, I'm kind of lucky. If you ask most judges, they will tell you I'm one of the most irreverent people they've ever met.
Okay. I know some irreverent judges too.
Well, that's true, but it comes in handy sometimes, because I can say things to a judge that some of the new lawyers can't say and get away with.
With age comes wisdom.
Well,
I don't really care anymore.
Yeah, it's much more than I don't care anymore. But if you say it politely, and again, this goes back to the civility thing.
Yep.
There's nothing wrong with looking at a judge and say, Judge, you got it wrong. You can't look at him and say, Judge, you're a stupid idiot, read the rule. But you can say, Judge, here's what the rule says. Here's the way I interpret that. You can have a conversation with them about what you perceive that they're doing wrong. And most judges want to do the right thing. So if you just don't point things out to them, they're going to keep doing it the way they've always done it. So you got to speak up. It's one.
Well, you're an advocate for your client. You
Right.
got to speak up. That's your job and responsibility too.
But it's one of the hardest things for new lawyers to do, because they think, oh, this person up there in the black robe, they're all knowing. Well, no, they're human beings also.
Right.
So, teaching them to speak up is important.
What's your favorite food? What do you enjoy, or what's your celebratory meal?
I'm a steak and potatoes guy.
Yeah.
My doctors tell me I'm going to die young, and I say that ship has already sailed. But, I don't eat fruits and vegetables very much at all. I'm a steak and potatoes guy. So, at the end of a hard day, or back in the old days when I tried cases regularly, take me out for a big old T-bone steak.
Where'd you like to go?
Well, Texas Cattle Company has, you'll remember this, the Red Barn.
Yeah, I remember
Used to
when
be-
it burned down.
Yeah,
they
when
had
it
great
burned down.
steaks.
Oh, I cried when it was
Yeah.
burned down. No ambiance inside, picnic tables.
At best.
At best. But the best steaks
Yep.
you ever had. So I went from there to Texas Cattle Company is great. We've got a number of steakhouses in town, so I frequent them all.
Do you like going to movies? Are you a movie buff?
I'm not. I haven't seen a movie in more years than I can remember.
I don't really go to them anymore anyway. It just seems like there's a lot of preaching going on, and they just don't seem to be as entertaining
Yep.
as they used to be.
Yeah.
What is your favorite TV courtroom drama? Not the one that's the most accurate, but which one do you just laugh at?
Well, it's hard because my wife always says she will not watch a courtroom type show with me because I stand up and object at times. Actually, I have found that there is a channel where between 8 and 10 o'clock at night, I can watch 2 episodes of Perry Mason.
Yes, I like Perry
And
Mason.
I really like Perry Mason.
Were you a Matlock fan?
I was not as big a Matlock
Yeah.
fan. I watched it, and there's a new Matlock coming out.
I see that.
I've seen advertised, so I'm sure I'll check it out.
Well, my daughter is an attorney, and a very good one in my biased opinion. But I will ask her stuff. She said, "Dad, you cannot just base your whole legal opinions based on what you see on Law and Order. It's not real." And every time she says that, it's like, of course it's not real, and you're making me realize that.
And it shows like that. I mean, I'll pick on one. Chicago, what's the one with the law enforcement?
Eli?
Chicago PD.
Yeah, there we go. Chicago PD. I hate that show because those are people, and they advocate it. They say it in almost every episode. They'll do whatever they have to do to make the arrest. Well, that's
Goes back to making it work.
right, and that's just wrong. And you see them doing things that violate the law all of the time on that show, and it just drives me absolutely crazy because those, we've got most law enforcement officers, a lot of law enforcement, I'm not going to say most, they're high school graduates who've then gone to the police academy. Well, if they've watched Law and Order, if they've watched Chicago PD, even if they've watched Blue Bloods and all, and they see police doing things that they can't legally do, it's hard for them to understand, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to do this.
It's just a TV show.
Yeah.
And it's entertainment, not
Right.
the law.
So I wish, I understand that it's entertainment. I understand it's what people want to see, but I wish when you're talking about fundamental institutions of our government that they would be more accurate into how it really has to be done.
Music. Do you like music?
I do like music.
What's your favorite kind of music?
Okay, I'm really old-fashioned. I love music that tells a story. So I fell in love with folk singers back in the 60s and 70s, and I moved from that to country music. I actually listen to a lot of country music.
Like old country music.
Old country music.
Real country music.
Real country. And Okay, as I mentioned, I went to undergraduate school in New Orleans. When I'm really down and need to pick me up, there's nothing like good New Orleans jazz.
Yeah.
There's a place called Preservation Hall that's on a street that runs between Bourbon Street and Royal Street in New Orleans. And I used to go there regularly. Just good old New Orleans jazz is a real pick-me-up for me.
Are you a sports fan other than a frustrated Seminole?
Not particularly, because I've been frustrated throughout my career. My high school didn't have particularly good sports teams. I went to Tulane undergraduate school. We didn't have particularly good sports teams.
Tulane was everyone's homecoming game back in the day.
Tulane was. Actually, the high point of my sports in undergraduate school was when Tulane beat LSU for the first time in 25 years. And I think it was also the last time they beat LSU.
Did you play any sports in high school?
I didn't.
What did you do in high school?
I was a bookworm.
Okay.
I read a lot of history, a lot of biography and all. My father, who was an engineer with the Department of Defense, as you can tell from how long this podcast is going, I talk a lot. So at night over the dinner table, I would talk a lot about what I'd read and stuff. And my father would always say, a cesspool of worthless information.
Yeah. The podcast is fine. We're fine with time, so that's not it. But we are at the end of my questions. You're retiring from public service. You're retiring from the office. What are your plans as you not go off into the sunset, but just don't go to Bartow every day? It sounds like camping may be in your future.
My first day that I don't have to go to work, I'm getting in the motorhome. I'm driving north, taking a left-hand turn and heading west. And where I'll be on any given night just depends on where I am that day.
That's awesome.
I'm just going to spend. My plan is to spend 6 months just doing some traveling around,
just decompressing,
and decompress, and then I'll decide what I'm going to do.
Well, good. I'm glad you're not rushing into it. Do you have anything else you want to talk about, or did we miss anything? We got through everything that was on here. If there's anything we missed that you do want to talk about, we can certainly take time to do that.
Nope, I just really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I think
I've enjoyed this.
Good. Well, I appreciate you being here and giving our listeners some insight as to how you run your office and your approach to office and the responsibilities and challenges that you have, that your attorneys have, your investigators. And how important it is to interact and the professionalism that you bring. People need to understand that for our system of justice to work and to prosper and to succeed, we've got to have a strong public defender's office. That is part of the equation. And you cannot think these men and women are not real attorneys. They are. Like you said, if you need a real attorney, you might want to look in the public defender's office or someone with PD experience. And I do believe that's true because you've got so much experience being in court.
Yep.
So, Eli, you got anything before we wrap it up?
No, sir.
Well, Rex, thank you very much for your many, many years of service. I don't want to say decades because that might sound longer than you want, but you have been a public servant for decades. You've been a very loyal and dedicated public servant. You've served the court system well. You've served our society well. And I want to thank you personally for coming on the podcast and the life that you've lived. And I hope the next 6 months after November, I think the public defender's office is being left in good hands with Mrs. Allen that's coming in to take over. And I'm sure you're not going to totally stop paying attention to it. You may be a casual observer. You may be in the audience somewhere. Or
I suspect I won't be able to totally get away from it.
It'll take a while. You'll enjoy the first 6 months, but you'll miss it to some degree. But thank you very much.
Well, I want to thank you. I think it's very important that podcasts like this and information like this get out there. The better informed the public is as to how our justice system works, the better the system of justice will work.
Well, thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of Todd's Podcast with Rex Dimmig, our public defender for District 10, so Judicial District 10. And thank you. Appreciate everything you've done for us. And with that, we'll say goodbye. Hey, everybody, I want to thank you for listening to Todd's Podcast. This has been your host, Todd Dantzler. As always, don't forget to rate, review, follow, and subscribe to Todd's podcast on your favorite podcast app. If you have any questions for me or any suggestions for future guests, please call or text our number at 863-288-0944 or visit todddantzler.com. Again, that's 863-288-0944 or visit my website, todddantzler.com. I look forward to hearing your questions and feedback, and please take care.